If you're a first-time buyer and you'd love to buy a home, this is for you. David Sidoni will cover how you too can buy a home. And David Sidoni is North America's leading advocate for first-time buyers. He's the founder of the How to Buy a Home platform, which focuses on educating and empowering this ignored sector. And he's an industry disruptor, and he has 1.7 million downloads for his podcast called the How to Buy a Home podcast. First question I have is, how can entrepreneurs buy a home?
Property Wealth Strategies podcast with Lily Patrascu shares world's most influential property investors, sharing their strategies for making money with property.
Probably one of the biggest questions I get. Entrepreneurship is such a wonderful avenue for people to take in their life. Unfortunately, the real estate industry is old, run by a bunch of dinosaurs, and they love a nice W-2 employee that has a regular job, something that they can quantify, put on a piece of paper in order to give you a loan for a job. So the past 20 years or so, there's been a wonderful change where people who are self-employed, people who are entrepreneurs, people who have to show income in a different way can find a path to getting an approval for a home loan. And one of the big things that I talk about on the show is when you find those avenues and you figure out that you're an entrepreneur, but you're renting, everybody's monthly rent payment ends up being their biggest line item of their monthly expenses. And if houses are unaffordable in your area, the biggest mindset change is you're not going out trying to buy a home at an incredible discount to get some crazy deal. A home is the biggest builder of wealth. So what you're actually doing is taking your biggest payment and you're turning it into what I like to call a rent replacement strategy.
Thank you. So I've experienced that as an entrepreneur, you can be almost treated like a second-class citizen because when you are an employee, it's so easy, right? Let's say you make 70K per year, and then you get typically like four times and a half your yearly salary in a mortgage, right?
Yes.
In the US, it's somewhat different, somewhat similar. Mm-hmm. And now, when you are an entrepreneur, what they will typically count on is the profit over the last 2 years. So let's say you made 100K in revenue, and then you have a profit of, let's say, 20,000. Then they will be counting that as the income. Based on that, maybe you would be getting around 85K in terms of a mortgage, but please correct me on that if you have better numbers than me. So what I'm trying to say is that as an employee, you have an easier path to buying a home. So I wonder, what do you suggest for entrepreneurs to do to buy their first home?
The biggest thing, the difference between an entrepreneur and an employee who receives a salary, the way the banks all over the world are looking at people who are trying to buy a home is you make this much money and then we look at how much do you need to survive? What are your monthly bills? So what entrepreneurs tend to do is they might take a salary cut for a year or two. They might not show themselves as they're individually profitable. So you not only want to show the company is profitable, but you want to show that you have a salary towards yourself. Now, this is a gigantic, it's a big long-term financial picture. There are a lot of entrepreneurs I know who stayed renters for a couple of years because every single cent they made, they put back into their company. And that is a wonderful formula. As long as you've looked at your rent versus the potential appreciation in the long run for replacing that rent with ownership. People always try to time the market, but nothing beats time in the market, especially when houses are going up. So it's a large, almost philosophical financial decision. Do I want, as part of my entrepreneurship, to stay a renter for a little while and sacrifice what could be long-term financial stability down the road? Or do I want to show a lower profit for myself in terms of salary? And here in North America, that can do a lot of times that has to do with write-offs. People will try to use a tax deductions, everything that they make money on. They'll reduce, like they make $100,000 and maybe they took $50,000 in salary, but they'll write it down to show that they only took $20,000 in salary, because you can have deductions for any things that you want to call education or research. If you are an entrepreneur that's trying to develop some type of app or blog or something that has to do with entertainment, you can write off going to the movies. So maybe you figure out, let's not do that. But the main thing is making that decision. Do I want to show that I'm making enough salary and have that money available that someone would give me money to purchase a home?
Thank you. Is it a strategy as well to get employed by another company to do something that is reflects a stable income perhaps as a part-timer, so that you can build that kind of I'm not sure if it's called credit, but that credit worthiness for banks, so that you can be seen as a reliable, payer of potential mortgage?
The term credit worthiness usually refers to the long term of how you pay your bills, how you have accepted some sort of credit line and paid it off. What you're looking for is to be approved. You want to get a loan approval, and that is going to be based on a total salary. It's much easier for them. What I have found that a lot of people who have, what people have affectionately called side hustles, maybe if you're showing that you're making $50,000 a year, but you need to show that you make $75,000 a year. Sometimes, especially entrepreneurs who are willing to work 6-7 days a week while they're getting their dream together, sometimes it's good to take a $25,000 side hustle, something that you can show as a W-2. And that way, if you do happen to make more than that $50,000 within your company, then you can put that money right back into it and stay on the path that you want to follow.
Thank you. What other strategies are there for entrepreneurs to buy their first home?
I think probably one of the main things that people are looking at is to understand entrepreneurs are more fiscally savvy than most people, understanding how to use money as a leverage tool. So understanding all of the low down payment options in your area. There are so many myths with how much money you need to put down. And from an entrepreneur standpoint, if a loan is anywhere from 5 to 8%, it's still relatively what the financial world would deem as cheap money. And so understanding what are the options, forget looking at it as an entrepreneur or an employee, just look at it, how low a down payment can any person use to buy a home, and will leveraging a loan with a higher loan amount be something that is going to make more money for me in the future? So it's really about hiring and talking to the best people in your area who are creative. And fortunately, entrepreneurs, they tend to attract creative people.
Thank you. I think another strategy is to reduce your costs. So, for example, let's say if you're going to go for getting a mortgage and you are employed, I think one important thing is to reduce your cost, right?
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of people end up figuring out that getting into becoming a homeowner sooner is a better path for them. So instead of trying to reach out for the large home right away, you work on a budget for yourself. One of the key things I tell people is automate savings immediately. And once you have that automation, you can look at keeping your costs down on the business side and building a savings account, and then maybe starting with what we would call a stepping stone property. Maybe instead of buying a home right away, you buy a nice condo or apartment to start with.
Thank you. What else would you recommend entrepreneurs do in order to buy their first home?
I think creating the same way that you have an entrepreneur is looking at how to build their business, you take the same approach towards owning a home. If you're going to build your business and you're going to be dedicating yourselves to that for years to come, one day you're going to wake up and it's going to be 5 years from now and you're going to have rented for those 5 years. So just like you built a business plan, a marketing plan, a creative plan, you do the same thing. Build a budget for yourself, have some place where you're automatically having money go out of money in towards a savings account that can go towards your down payment. Depending on where you are in the world, you want to check on your credit score and your credit rating. Very important. And then one of the key factors for entrepreneurs is keep an eye on that debt. If you're taking out a lot of debt to bootstrap and to do your company or your entrepreneurial desire on your own, you have to make sure that that debt doesn't count against you so much that you're not someone that the bank feels is going to be able to repay a loan.
Thank you. A lot of people talk about buying a home with no money down. Can you tell us how it works?
There are multiple different ways to buy a home with no money down. In general, what I like to tell people now is that's a bit of an older philosophy. It's also something that we like to call bait and switch. They're trying to get you to come and be their customer and their client, but understanding hiring the right people. There are, different programs in different countries, depending on, here in North America, in the United States, if you're a veteran, someone who is active in the military, at one point, you can get a zero down. Well, at one point, if you were anytime during your lifetime, you can get a zero down payment. You can also get it for rural areas and something called a USDA loan. And the other thing is, as the market shifts and evolves, every single year, there are different down payment assistance programs, sometimes through your government, sometimes through your cities, but finding those are something that can help you. So you might end up paying zero when all's said and done once you've received the grant.
Thank you. For example, in the UK, I saw advertised that if you are a renter that has been paying your rent on time for at least 12 months, then you can qualify for something like 0% down payment mortgage. Although I don't know enough about that. Are there similar sort of schemes in the US?
Yeah, the UK and the US are very different. I have a lot of friends and colleagues that I talk to there. And one of the things that rent counts in the United States towards your credit score. So if you have a high credit score because of your great rental history, most of the time, now again, if you're a veteran or you're using a USDA loan, you can do zero down. If you have a down payment assistance, you can do zero down. But what a renter can do is use their high credit score to get loans with as little as 3% down.
Wow, that is interesting. What about buying a property with no money down with friends or with investors or partnering up with a joint venture partner?
There are a lot of people that have been coming together. One of the I would say one of the things to be careful of when you're buying in a joint venture is making sure that everyone understands the legal aspects that go. If it's friends and family, that's completely different. I am all for people getting together. Here in the States, they like to call it house hacking, and we have a lot of friends that are buying homes together. The difficulty with that can be is that you never know where life is going to take you. If you're two people and you're friends or your investment buddies, what if one of you wants to sell the house to open a new company? Or what if one of you wants to sell the house because you're getting married or you're going to have children? So they can be a little bit tricky. And that's why I recommended them that they look into like a multi-generational home where you buy a home that has two individual residencies, like a duplex or a triplex. On the other side of things, there's so much wealth that has gone on. Now that we've got past COVID, the countries around the world put so much money into bringing their economies back. a lot of real estate has gone up throughout the world. That means parents, uncles, aunts, grandmas, and grandpas are sitting there with lots of equity in their home. That's a great resource to ask your family members to help you with a portion of their equity to cash out on that. And then you can end up buying a home with zero down.
Thank you. What are some good ways to optimize your credit worthiness so that you are more likely, once you do qualify for a mortgage, perhaps to improve the likelihood of getting it at a lower interest?
Yeah, number one, pay on time. That's the absolute. I go into all kinds of different pieces to help people. I believe in today's world with the automation, like everybody should have a monthly reminder on their phone, when they're going to pay off their credit. Don't wait for an email to come to you, or don't wait for something to come in the mail. Pay it off quickly. The one missed payment could really change everything. So number one is make sure that you do that. Number two is to investigate what your country or your area of the world, what they have that offers that changes your credit score. In the United States, we have something called an authorized user. That is a gigantic way. And as a matter of fact, I started the podcast back in 2019, and I reached out to all these I'd been doing real estate for a long time. I reached out to someone explained the authorized user to me. I called my dad. He just put my name on a credit card. I didn't have anything to do with it, but he put me, and that credit card had 30 years of credit history. And that history is part of your credit score. My score went up 40 points in 30 days.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah.
What about if you find a really good deal or multiple really great deals, but you don't have the money to do those particular deals?
That's where one of the biggest pieces of guidance and advice that I can give to people is, as exciting as entrepreneurship is and following your passion and your dreams, funding it can be really boring. So starting with planning and doing that as kind of a side hustle, planning and making sure that you have everything in place, talking to a great creative team of professionals who can show you the creative ways. So if you go online and Google it, you think, well, I can't buy that because this is what it says you need. Well, that's one person's opinion. That's one website. If somebody else you've already had a meeting with and they have your entire financial situation, you might be able to find out creative ways to do it. And what I always tell people is, what's the worst thing that happens if you hire a team, you talk to the team, and you say, let's try to buy that property, and you don't buy it? Well, now you've learned what to do for the next time. So there's no downside.
Thank you. What's a good way for entrepreneurs to buy more than one home?
I think the best way is, once you purchase a home, you've already learned something. You've gone through the budgeting, the saving for the down payment. You've definitely explored all the different loan options. You've seen everything that's out there. And what's key is you've made a great relationship with professionals in the business. So the first thing you do is, when you close on the home, go ahead and celebrate for a week or two, and then call those trusted people that helped you with the biggest step of your life and say, okay, let's start doing this again. And then keep that first home as the beginning of your financial empire, because no matter when you buy a home, you're never going to be able to make more money than having a home that you own for a longer period of time. So the biggest advice I give everyone is, buy that first home. 80-90% of the people in the world sell their first home so they have that big pile of money to go buy an even bigger home. I think it's great that, since you've already learned the whole process, start again a month after you own a home and start saving again, and then move in 2 years, 3 years, 7 years, and keep that first home. The equity you're going to build in that is going to be just as lucrative as a retirement fund that you started at 21 years old.
Thank you. For those entrepreneurs that have, let's say, only $25,000 or pounds, what would you have them do to get them on track to buying their first home?
Explore all the programs. what I find is too many, and actually, let me rephrase that. Explore the people that can help you explore all the programs. In today's world of convenience, where we have the entire information of the universe on our phone, too many people spend too much time trying to research it on their own. I had a doctor who came through my program, and it's all free information that I give to people. And he was learning. And about a year later, he asked me, okay, how do I hire somebody? And I said, you've been listening for a year and you're just asking right now? Okay. So I gave him somebody. And after like a week or two of working with a professional team, he said, oh my gosh, I'm like my patients who come to me and they search online for weeks before they come to meet me. They go on WebMD and they find all these terrible things that are wrong with them. And instead of just asking the doctor in the first place. So if you have $25,000, I have interviews on the podcast with people who have never bought a home before in their life, and they end up buying a home for $5,000 because they've used some sort of government program, or they've used a down payment assistance program, or they found one of those 0 or 3% low down payment programs. There are so many people that bought a home for $5,000 or $10,000, and their mortgage payment was almost the exact same as their rent.
Thank you. Tell us more strategies to buy a home. So, for example, in the UK, I know there's a rent to buy scheme where I think you part rent, part buy. And although I do think that they were quite expensive, it can be like a transitionary period between you being able to buy a home if you don't meet certain criteria, and that was like a government program. And there was some very strict criteria. I think you had to make between, I can't remember if it was like something like between 70 and 90,000 per year. And then it was something like that. And you had to live in a certain borough. So there were some limiting criterias, but when I looked at the property, it was luxury and it was in a very desirable location, really close to the station. And that kind of property if it was like a non-government property, would have been like a lot more, like maybe 3 times more. So I wonder are there any similar strategies to this one, the rent to buy, or other strategies that perhaps you know of that people can use to buy a home?
Governments in general, both the United States and UK and Australia, they're doing housing affordability to appease their constituents. And they're trying to make sure that, because since COVID, housing prices have exploded all over the globe, they're creating and forcing these communities to sell some homes at an affordable price, comparable to what it would be for a rent. They're obviously very sought after, difficult to find. And that's why, instead of trying to do it on your own, your number one first step is to hire a professional team that knows about these. You're exactly right. A lot of them have the interesting thing about the incomes is most of the time it's an income maximum. They're trying to make it affordable for people that wouldn't be able to afford something in the first place. So people will come to me very excited because it's a beautiful place and a great location, but they make too much money. So understanding where you are in the bracket and then having the right team going out there to help you find those types of places, that can be a really great source for buyers. As far as the rent to buy, I'm not sure how it is in the UK. But here in the United States, you make a lot more money when you're the person selling the house than trying to buy the house. It's something like 60 or 70% of the people who get into those rent to buy never buy in the first place. Because what happens is they go into the process and they think that by just putting money into it, they're going to be able to buy the home in a year. But what you have to remember is, if you have to be in a rent to buy, it's because at that point, you're not credit worthy to buy a home. So you can't just start a rent to buy program and pay your rent. You have to start a rent to buy program, and during that year, work to improve your credit worthiness. That's the best way to succeed in a program like that.
Thank you. What are the biggest mistakes entrepreneurs make when trying to buy their first home?
I think probably the biggest mistake is waiting. In the United States, last year was a difficult year for home buyers, and the average age of the first time home buyer in 2024 was 38 years old. I think about entrepreneurs, people who went to university or went to college and come out of school, and maybe in their late 20s, they've kind of figured out what they want to do. Well, if you wait until 38, that's 8 years of rent. That's 8 years of equity. The number one mistake people make is not understanding that they should start their planning, even if they think they're not going to buy for a year or two. And to my entrepreneur friends, that's where I have to say to you, I understand. I'm one of you. All I think about is my entrepreneurship and my company 24/7. But kind of like your taxes or paying your utility bills, at some point, you should start thinking about housing and give a little bit of time every week to just start that plan.
Thank you. What kind of routine, habits, apps, tools do you recommend for entrepreneurs to do or to use in order to buy their first home?
I think it's all about the budgeting apps. There are so many different budgeting apps. One of the biggest mistakes I see entrepreneurs are people that are trying to put every cent back into their what they're attempting to do. The better budgeting apps you pay for, it's not a lot of money, but if it's 20 or 30 or $40 a month, and there are plenty of them, and you can research them on your own, go ahead and pay those people a little bit, and you'll end up being able to completely automate everything that you're trying to do. And I think having that as part of your day, having it as the reminders for yourself for all of your credit cards and your debt and your loan payments, creating the automation to be part of your day where it's on your phone. I always love it if I happen to be taking a break and I'm scrolling on social media and I get a reminder about something to do for my budgeting. And it kind of makes me go, oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't be watching silly videos right now. Maybe I should be thinking about doing something to better my life.
Thank you. In terms of the budgeting apps, what is so critical about leveraging them? Is it that they remind you something like, okay, don't drink 5 coffees today because you're saving this much? Or is it something more serious, like, pay your credit card 7 days before it's actually due, or that kind of thing?
Both. That's the beauty of them. The biggest part of your own budgeting journey is understanding, how do you see money? I actually interviewed some people who talked about how it's generational, almost hereditary. How did your parents deal with money? You need to know, am I the kind of guy who, like, there are apps that will tell you, hey, buddy, that's your second time at Starbucks today. What are you doing? It will literally tell you that. And there are some apps that will send you an update when the stock market is changing, or when treasury bills are changing, or when something different is happening in Hong Kong, and maybe you can take an advantage of that particular market. So realizing your own personal budgeting style, and then picking and choosing the reminders. And then the biggest one for entrepreneurs is, if you pay for the apps, they have such incredible ways to detail and categorize every piece of your spending. So, okay, this was something that's going towards my business. This is something towards personal, and it separates it all out. So when you're doing your profit and loss sheets, they just come out so much easier for you.
Wow, that's fascinating, because I think that when you are being assessed for a mortgage, I think they look at all of your expenses, especially the regular expenses. So for example, like your gym, your transport, your bills, and they kind of calculate from that, okay, how likely is it that this person is going to be, paying us back? So I wonder, what kind of expenses do you recommend that entrepreneurs reduce so that they are more likely to be considered for a mortgage?
In talking with an individual mortgage person in your particular country, state, area, wherever you are, they're going to be able to tell you exactly what, here in the United States, we have 28 different credit scores. Now, there are a bunch of apps that tell you your credit score, and people will come to me and say, I have a great credit score. And I'm like, that's not the one that a mortgage bank looks at. So talking to a professional and getting those deep details can be very important. And once you get those details, that's where you can use the app to help categorize, okay, this is spending that is going to go against me for a home loan. This is spending that I have found out is not going to be a problem. And then when it comes to your own personal saving within those apps as well, you can just set a monthly budget for yourself and say, once I hit this much spending, just tell me to stop. So utilizing those pieces and then talking to someone who can help you categorize, because you should be able to put money back into your business and it not count against you. But I've had a lot of times where I've had people that had to go and completely redo their taxes from the year before to show that they made more money instead of trying to take the deductions.
That's interesting. I find that, for example, for the becoming credit worthy, one important thing as well is to check for errors. So, for example, for a long time, I was subscribed to this app that I can't remember right now, but it gave me the readings from 4 different credit companies like Experian, Crediva, and 2 more, Equifax and another one. And basically the most important part, aside from actually paying on time, I think is also to make sure that your address is listed correctly. So for example, if let's say you live at flat 192 Pedro Road, and then in, I don't know, for your phone company, you listed it slightly differently, then that could become a problem because it looks like you lived at 2 different addresses. So sometimes like correcting that through the system, and actually when you subscribe to this kind of app, you can write to them and say, by the way, there is a mistake here. And then they write to those particular people that gave you, I don't know, a phone bill or, water bill or whatever it was. And they correct it everywhere so that it's all even. Because if it isn't, if there's any sort of like potential error or something that looks like an error, and it could even be like a minor error that could impact your credit score and also how you kind of come across in their system. So would you be able to tell us more about that? Like how, what else would you do to kind of help first-time buyers to buy their home from that perspective of the errors and so on?
Well, first of all, oh my gosh, you are right on. That is something that I try to talk to everyone about all the time. The number one problem with the entire credit rating system all over the world is the mistakes. And it's the address. People who have a very common name, if you're a John Smith in America, you can get all kinds of misinformation. Medical bills will stay on there forever. In fact, our government just last week had a huge, overwhelming change in the laws that they're going to not let old medical bills because there were so many mistakes with them, where the insurance was saying one thing and the hospital was saying the other. So I couldn't have said that better. You need to check. And well, here, I know how to do it in America, so I bet Google can do this. In America, 3 times you can go to a government site. It's annualcreditreport.com. And 3 times a year, TransUnion was probably the 4th one that you were talking about. You can go in America, it's Equifax, TransUnion, and oh my gosh, now I forgot the 3rd one.
Experian.
There you go, Experian. Yeah. So
Crediva. And Crediva.
Yeah, we don't do Crediva on the annualcreditreport.com. But so you can go to that, and for free, you can get your entire credit report, not just your score, your report. And that's where you find all of those mistakes. So you just gave me a great idea. If you're in the UK, just Google, does the UK have something similar to the US? www.annualcreditreport.com. And then you can go down the rabbit hole and find all the other ways. But I couldn't agree more. finding those mistakes. I've seen so many different stats. Some places say, oh, 30% of credit reports have a mistake. And then I talked to another credit specialist and said, I do this every day. It's about 70% have a mistake. And it could be as silly as a $10 phone bill because you have the wrong address on there.
Thank you. The other thing that I find is important is, for example, when you move house, let's say you moved from A address to B address, ideally you need to move all of your addresses, because then it will impact your credit score as well when you appear at multiple addresses. So, for example, when you get your credit score, you get your credit report, it will flag certain issues that you have, and it will tell you basically almost like an action list of what you should be doing to fix it. And yes, a lot of times you will be listed still, for example, at a phone bill that you had from 6 years ago, and you realize, oh my God, you forgot to change it. And that's when you kind of like have to fix it really quickly before you actually apply for this. The other thing that's very important, for example, in the UK, is to be on the electoral roll. And if you're not, that could be a massive problem. So I wonder, is it the same in the US? Do you have to be on the electoral roll?
I wish it was, but it's not. In the US, when you're 18 years old, more people will try to sell you a credit card than will try to get you to sign up to vote. So that's unfortunate. But for us, once you turn 18 years old, they start tracking everything. And what you were talking about is so important, because when people in their 20s, maybe you're living with roommates, maybe different people are taking care of the bills. And when you're a younger person moving from one place to another, you're just trying to figure out how to get all your stuff from place A to place B. So making sure that you go back and check everything. And that's where something like annualcreditreport.com, or whatever the UK version may be of that, just once a year, when you're sitting down to do your taxes or do your spring cleaning, take a look at your credit as well.
Thank you. The other thing that I thought was quite important was when like checking this, for example, in the UK, you can check this monthly because you pay like a membership. I think it was like £14 a month, and you can check this credit report and credit score every month. And you can access it every day, really. But what's important is to kind of write to these companies that have made mistakes, to kind of correct everything that's incorrect. And to kind of keep on top of things, because sometimes you will have things that you haven't even done. So, for example, if let's say if you were ever in debt, okay, and then that company sold that debt to another one, then you can come up twice for the same debt that you haven't paid. And for example, in the UK, I think your debt can stay on your credit file for at least 6 years. So I wonder, how would you recommend for entrepreneurs to what you would recommend for entrepreneurs to do when they have a significant debt that perhaps they haven't paid yet? What would you have them do to make sure that they start becoming credit worthy again, and they start improving their likelihood of getting a home?
So here in the United States, we have a lot of companies that are going to try to sell you on credit cleanup. And one of the biggest things that comes with credit cleanup is a loan. A lot of times, if you have multiple different credit cards, people will come to you and say, let's do a consolidation loan. Let's take all these high interest rate loans, put them all together, and give you one lower rate loan. That can be a great thing to help people survive. If you're attempting to grow your credit, though, you close all those accounts, and now those accounts are not reporting in the positive way for you. So the better way is, there are multiple different financial gurus over the years. There's this, you can Google something called the snowball technique, which is where you try to take one credit card and pay that one down and pay the minimums on the rest, and kind of roll it up like a snowball going down a hill to attack them all. It might not be as cheap as consolidating everything into one place, but it will make you more credit worthy down the line once you have everything under control.
Thank you. Tell us more about what you've personally done in order to buy your first home.
Oh, wow. That was, well, On the podcast, I talk a lot about the reason why at 49 years old, I started this podcast to try to help people was because in my 20s, nobody did it for me. I lost so much money. When I was 21 years old, I moved to Hollywood and I was actually in a movie making plenty of money and could have bought a home. And I rented 4 different apartments in Hollywood for a total of $104,000, which is like $225 or $250,000 in today's money. And when I moved out at 28 years old, the only thing I had was a $1,500 security deposit, as opposed to owning a home for 8 years. So my personal experience was, I wish I had a time machine and I could have gone back and told 21-year-old me that I could have bought a condominium or a townhome or an apartment that was just as nice as the apartments that I rented. But then for me, after that, I started as a real estate investor. That was my original entrepreneurship. And instead of taking all the cash from some successes that I had and building them up, which is a great way to, a lot of the way wealthy people will grow, put everything you get right back into it. I always took 30% and put it into a down payment savings. So if you happen to do something that is successful, the lure, there's such a desire to put it all into something else, but maybe get some stability and hold some of it back.
Thank you. For those entrepreneurs that are not making any profit,
yep,
what would you have them do to buy their first home?
I would say keep working at what you're doing and start to automate some sort of savings. And so that even though you're putting everything back into it, you're still building something. And then start your education, because you may find those rent to own situations. If you're not making any profit, maybe you are going to be the person that qualifies for a grant or a program, because they have maximum limits, like we talked about. If you're not making profit, we might feel like we have $1 million idea and we know it's going to be something great, but eat some humble pie and be okay. I don't make that much money right now, so maybe I can get one of these affordable houses that should be 2 or 3 times more than the price, but the government has to sell it to me. And then later on, when you're making all that money, you'll have tons more choices.
Thank you. Where can entrepreneurs find you?
Howtobuyahome.com. Everything's there. Spell it out. Howtobuyahome.com.
Follow me for more property wealth strategies.